Thank you. Thank you. This is just a quick presentation of what we are doing in Italy on standardization in structural health monitoring, and especially under the initiative taken by the Italian Standard Institute, the UNI, UNI means Unificazione Italiana. They have established a working group in the framework of the activity of the Structural Engineering Committee, which is the Italian correspondent to the CENTIC 250. And this working group is already working. It has been composed by several members, engineering companies. Myself, I'm representing an engineering company there, although I'm also a university professor. There are universities. University of Trento, and Daniele Zonda, who is here, is one of the members of the group, the University of Padua. And then representative from the Steel Construction Association, representative from the Concrete Construction Association, from the Software House Association, from the Italian Welding Institute, and from the National Institution of Engineers, the Consiglio Nazionale Ingegneri. I have been nominated coordinator of the group, and the secretariat is run by an officer of UNI, and there is also a liaison member with the Committee on Mechanical Vibrations, since this aspect has been considered important to the development of these guidelines. The terms of reference that have been given to the group are listed here. Then the main scope is to prepare a draft for structural monitoring guidelines to be approved by the committee under the form of a technical report. And the main focus of these guidelines is that they should be applicable to civil engineering structures, mainly building and bridges, but not only building and bridges, or similar structure in the civil engineering field that can have similar problems in monitoring. The guidelines should cover all aspects of structural health monitoring, including the utilization of the results coming from structural health monitoring. Originally, the term should be ending in March 2015, but it has been postponed to fall 2015, and also because assignments to the working group have been taking a long time due to bureaucratic reasons. You know that Italy is probably the most bureaucratic country, and I think that Europe is not so different, the European Union. And then we have performed a detailed review of existing documents. We have also reviewed practically all the documents that Dimitris Diamantidis has shown in the list. And we have made a thorough and general discussion on scope and extent of these guidelines. We have initiated to write a glossary, to individuate the glossary terms. We have already set the table of contents, and more or less 1/3 of the text has been written as a tentative approach. It may be interesting to look at the principles that we have been that were behind the decision to set up this working group, and also we have been taking into account during the development of the text, is that it has been recognized that the Italian construction industry needs national reference document for a correct implementation of the structural monitoring principles. That's because the Italian market, but I guess that the situation is quite common all over, is characterized by a large number of small companies only offering installation of sensors and providing measurements, but there is not a very clear understanding of what structural health monitoring is and of the potential use and the advantages. In this, in particular, potential users are not aware of the advantages of structural monitoring in terms of efficiency of operation of infrastructure, and also of the more efficient and economical management. And one other aspect is that designers are not usually familiar with structural monitoring techniques. And that's one of the points, because most of the time structural monitoring should be considered in the design of a new structure. This is a very important issue. And of course, the document is intended to provide guidance to adopt structural monitoring technique during design, of construction and operation phases of a civil engineering structure. Some comments that we can already trace are that there is a need for a glossary as extended as practical. Also because it is an Italian document, so the glossary should consider all the terms that are used in the international field, but they should be defined in Italian, and so translating concept from one language to the other is not sometimes very easy. And the idea is just to perform a translation of the most relevant items contained in already existing glossaries. There are many, and one has been set up during the project IRIS, which is very broad. The guidelines should contain an introductory paper illustrating scope and advantage of structural monitoring, possible listing the most relevant international conference references. And this another issue that I see is very relevant also with respect to this cost action is that cost-benefit considerations should be taken into account at the system design stage. So this is a very important issue. Just giving a look to the table of contents, we can comment some of the chapters and points that we are listed in the table of contents that I recognize have been the subject of the previous discussion. Of course, there are some usual chapters like general subject and normative references. Then monitoring system design requirements, that's the first. Measuring strategies, design of monitoring system installation, operation and maintenance. This is one aspect that is sometimes not very well considered by people who want to install a monitoring system, that the monitoring system should be maintained. And this is a cost that should be taken into account in the cost-benefit analysis. Because sometimes, in my experience at least, the owners that install a monitoring system, when they have to spend some money for maintenance, they are reluctant. And sometimes they decide to shut off the system because they don't want to spend the money to maintain. Designing monitoring campaigns, this is a very important issue that Dimitris Diamantidis has just raised. We have to decide how many times we need to have the data and how this data relates to the management, then condition assessment, damage detection methods, reliability assessment of structural monitoring results, and especially utilization of structural monitoring techniques in the management of constructed facilities, and finally, relationship between structural monitoring and structural design. I guess that this is one aspect that we should discuss. We do not have already very clear ideas on how to develop, but we agree on the fact that this point should be considered in a structural monitoring guidelines. Of course, case studies will consider buildings, widgets, and some other structure, and then, of course, appendices, needed appendices, and the related standards. What I have to say that, sorry, I forgot an N, that we want to solicit international harmonization. Helmut Wenzel in the past years has already taken several initiatives to put together people who is interested in developing standards all over the world. And as far as it is concerned, in the next conferences related to structural monitoring, that some meeting is planned in order to discuss among the interested person in developing guidelines at the next ISHMI conference in Turin, Italy, and which will be held in first days of July and first days of September. Helmut Wenzel is organizing another meeting at the International Workshop on Structural Monitoring at Stanford. So I guess that these are two already established opportunities, but I guess that probably within the actions of this group, some other meeting can be organized. Okay, thank you very much. This is all what I had to say.